Beskar ma hula, is falcha, rish. Good afternoon, First Minister, Cabinet Secretaries, Ministers, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great privilege to welcome the Scottish Government's travelling Cabinet to Inveraray today. Argyll and Bute is honoured to be the first area to host the first of these public sessions for some years now. While we cannot always guarantee the weather, we have done so today. But what we can and always will is promise a very warm welcome when you visit Argyll and Bute. We are genuinely very glad to see you here today. Argyll and Bute, as you will have seen from your many visits earlier today, and I know you've done a number and it's only 2:30 in the afternoon, it's full of opportunities. There is tremendous work being done right across the area by our communities, by our local businesses, by Argyll and Bute Council and by other public agencies. Our area is arguably unique with its rich mix of remote, rural, peninsular and island communities. While this can pose many challenges, we work hard to overcome these, and working in partnership at all levels is a key element of success. We welcome the commitment you have given to working in partnership and see engagement like today's session as a key element of that. We are looking forward to a constructive and dynamic session this afternoon. And thank you once again for choosing Argyll and Bute as a place to relaunch the Scottish Government's travelling Cabinet. I now call on George Adam, Minister for Parliamentary Business, to give the next steps.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and Councillor Curry, thank you for your welcome there. My initial line was going to be, my name's George Adam, I'm the Minister for Parliamentary Business. You wouldn't have seen me in the video there because I wasn't on it. I am not some random that's just walked in off the street. I am indeed the Minister for Parliamentary Business. But it's great for us to be here, and it's great for me in particular because, as my title says, I don't get out to see the public that much, so it's great to be out seeing it get away from Parliament and Cabinets. Delighted to be here today. This is the fourth time we've been in Argyll and Bute, having met previously in Oban in 2015, Campbelltown in 2013 and Rothesay in 2010. This event also marks, as Councillor Curry said, the resumption of our travelling Cabinet programme since it was paused as a result of COVID-19 pandemic. And this is the first travelling Cabinet since August 2019. And I was saying to one of my colleagues, it's actually one of the 51st times that the Cabinet's been on the road since 2008. And the whole point of today is for us taking this opportunity to hear directly from thousands of people like yourself in communities across the country. We couldn't have wished for a better location to restart our meetings outside of Edinburgh, so I thank you all for having us here at this event. The Cabinet have already been extremely busy today. The First Minister met this morning with Inspire Inveraray to hear about their plans to develop the pier just outside the hotel, and now that it's in community ownership with support from the Scottish Land Fund. I'll let the First Minister say more about this visit shortly. Ministers have also undertaken a range of visits across Argyll and Bute today. The Deputy First Minister visited a £35 million long-term social housing development for 300 homes in Dumbeg. The Cabinet Secretary for Transport, Net Zero and Just Transition visited the Rest and Be Thankful on the A83. And the Cabinet Secretary... Now, panto season hasn't started yet. And the Cabinet Secretary for Education and Skills and Cabinet Secretary for Social Justice both visited Inveraray Primary School. The Cabinet Secretary for Justice and Home Affairs visited Inveraray Community Fire Station, and the Minister for Zero Carbon Buildings, Active Travel and Tenants' Rights visited yet another heat pump in Argyll Community Housing Association in Inveraray. Mr Harvey says he's got quite a lot of pictures with him next to heat pumps at the moment. You know, and last but by no means least, I enjoyed my visit to the Conversation Area Regeneration Scheme to see firsthand the benefits of the £2 million scheme that is unique to the town of Inveraray. And having had a similar scheme in my own constituency in Paisley, I can understand just how much that can make a difference to the local area. Following these visits, ministers held the formal cabinet meeting in West Lochfineside Parish Church Hall before coming here to see you all today. The main purpose of this event is to hear from you, and we are very much looking forward to listening to your views and answering the questions about local or national issues of the work of the Scottish Government. I will introduce the First Minister in a moment so he can say more about the Government is doing to support communities in Argyll and Bute and to create a fairer, more prosperous Scotland. Then I'll open the floor to take questions for about an hour. Following that, we hope you all join us for refreshments, the opportunity to continue the discussion with individual ministers after this event. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, will you please welcome the First Minister of Scotland, Humza Yousaf.
Thank you very much. Thanks, George, for the introduction. Thank you all for that very warm welcome indeed. This is our first, as George has mentioned, travelling cabinet post-COVID, and you can imagine the pressure. We've got some nervous cabinet secretaries and ministers up here, a nervous First Minister as well, having done this, as I say, having not done a travelling cabinet for a number of years. And then you can imagine my surprise as I walk into this wonderful hotel, only to be confronted by my former university professor, who is in the audience here, Professor Carman. Of course, any stories that he tells you about me at university are scandalous, libel, I should say. But for any of you that have any dislike of me, he's to blame. He is to blame. A very good politics professor. He was at Glasgow, and continues to be, I should say, at Glasgow University as well. Great pleasure for me to be at Inveraray, to be here in Inveraray. I used to come here very often at a time before my wife banished my motorbike and told me I couldn't have it. Thank you for that, Boo. I agree with that. If any of you can speak to her. But there's no excuse, whether you're, of course, travelling by public transport, whether you're coming via car, motorbike, or any other form of transport. It's a great place to come. Delighted to be here. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what I saw this morning in the presentation as well. But we're so delighted to be here in Inveraray in particular, but of course Argyll and Bute. And I want to thank our colleagues from the Council who we met earlier on today for being so welcoming in terms of hosting us here. And of course the vastness of this geography is well known, and I know there's many people here from right across Argyll and Bute. So you're all most welcome, and I'm very grateful to you for making the effort to come through here. Last time I was in Argyll and Bute was in the course of the summer, a really great visit to Oban in July, and I had the pleasure of visiting a number of local businesses and community organisations in Oban. One of them was the fantastic Hope Kitchen on Sorborough Road, and got to meet with some amazing volunteers, Marie, Emma McDougall, who make Hope Kitchen such a vibrant community hub. And I'm not going to lie to you, to this very day, I still think about the scones that I was given. If any of you have ever been to Hope Kitchen, they are famous. But actually what struck me above and beyond the wonderful goods that we got to sample was the community spirit that was there. That these have been some of the most difficult years I think any of us have ever experienced. Certainly in the time that I've been in government, 11 years in various different guises, I've never seen people, unfortunately, suffering to the extent that they're suffering at the moment. And we'll get into the detail of that, I'm sure, and how are we responding and so on and so forth. But it is often at the darkest of hours that we see community spirits. We see the light shine through, and that's often because there are good people in our communities who step up. But the government also doesn't shirk away from its responsibility. We have a responsibility to help as many people as we possibly can, and that includes, of course, the 86,000 people that are in Argyll and Bute, spread across a rich mix of villages, towns, and of course our island communities too. This region has very much formed the backdrop of centuries of traditional culture, of industry, of community building, from Evan McCall, the bard of Loch Fyne, born on these shores over 200 years ago, who wrote some of the most enduring Gaelic songs and poetry of this region, to Inveraray's very own Stuart Liddell, who earlier this month went up against some of the best pipers in the world, of course, to become champion of the Kintyre Invitational Contest, to the pioneering work of Craig Berwick Business Decelerator and Purpose Incubator on Bute, and promoting engagement, business resilience and well-being in the workplace. So Argyll and Bute has always had, for not decades but centuries, much to share with the rest of Scotland, I would suggest much of the world, and that is happening to this very day. And that's why we have chosen Argyll and Bute and Inveraray in particular for our very first travelling cabinet post the pandemic. And this isn't the only opportunity to question us that you'll get, and the only opportunity to have your voices heard. We also have later this year the Scottish Rural and Islands Parliament in Fort William this November. It's so popular, there's a waiting list. If you are interested, please, we'll send you the details of how to get onto the waiting list. But that fact that there is a waiting list demonstrates just how popular that opportunity is. Again, for parliamentarians, for ministers, for cabinet secretaries, to myself, of course, as First Minister, to listen directly to the voices of remote, rural and island Scotland. I want to make it clear that the purpose of Travelling Cabinet is to hear directly from you. So I will promise you I will shut up in just a moment, because we want to hear directly from you and leave as much opportunity for Q&A as we possibly can. This is unscripted, unplanned. We've not asked anybody to ask any specific questions. We don't know what's going to come up. We want you to genuinely ask about the issues that are important to you. In terms of my own priorities, and again, I'll be very, very brief. I tried to lay this out most recently in the programme for government, before that in the prospectus that I launched earlier this year. And at the heart of it, at the heart of what we want to try to do is make sure that we are tackling inequality. We're working with our partners in local government, we're working with communities on the ground to tackle inequality that exists. Scotland, the UK, we're wealthy countries. We have wealth. The trouble is, of course, that some people do not feel that. Some people do not feel that we are a wealthy country because of the poverty that they are suffering. And that wealth isn't as evenly distributed, in my opinion, as it absolutely should be. And in a country as wealthy as ours, as energy-rich as ours, we shouldn't have people living in fuel poverty. So the government's aim, its defining mission, will be to reduce poverty. Child poverty in particular, but poverty right across the board where we can. And we can speak more to that in the session. So we have to use every single power at our disposal within the constraints of devolution. And I promise you that is what the government will be focused on. The other thing we're focused on is creating opportunity. And we see many good examples of that opportunity. And that opportunity, I think, is linked to the challenge that we face of the climate catastrophe. And I don't need to tell anybody about how much of an existential threat the climate catastrophe is. All of us have watched in horror, I think, the scenes of the summer right across the world of the devastation that climate change has caused, right on our doorstep. Wildfires that engulfed many parts of Europe. The fact that we had water scarcity in Scotland, my goodness, water scarcity warnings in Scotland, right the way through to some devastating floods that have unfortunately killed many, many people right across the world. But within that, the tackling of the climate catastrophe is an opportunity for Scotland, and I would suggest for Argyll and Bute in particular. We have an abundance of renewable energy. And if I think about the first large-scale wind farm, began commercial operation in Benglas, 1999. There's huge opportunity in Scotland. The pioneering GIA battery project, another great example of what can be done through innovation and invention, tackling some of the world's biggest problems, in this case, the biggest existential threat the planet faces, opportunity to create jobs, to create wealth, and to make sure that communities benefit from the creation of that wealth as well. And doing that in a way that takes the community with us. We've got to hold our hands up and say, okay, we've heard the community around how to do things appropriately, properly, and in a way that takes those communities with us. And HPMAs would be an example of that. I know where communities, coastal communities, were exercised about our proposals, we were able to go, right, we've heard you, we've listened to you. How do we make sure we collectively preserve our marine environment, but do that in a way that takes the communities with us? And I believe we can absolutely do that. So those are the really defining missions of the government that I lead in terms of equality, opportunity and community. And I want to end on one of the key themes of my programme for government, which was that as well as being focused on reducing poverty, so an anti-poverty government, but also a pro-growth government. We believe the two go absolutely hand in hand. We believe that you have to grow our economy, not in a trickle-down way, because frankly we believe that the state has an intervention to make, but we believe that we can absolutely ensure that we widen that tax base, expand that revenue base, that tax base in order to bring revenue in, to invest in our public services and to invest in those anti-poverty measures. And that's, again, what we're fundamentally committed to doing. We cannot do any of that without ensuring that our remote, rural and island communities have a population that is not in decline. So we were talking earlier on with our partners in local government about the challenges around depopulation that remote, rural and island Scotland face, or Island Butte, of course, face, and how we're willing to work with them, keen to work with them, in relation to housing, in relation to creating opportunities for the jobs and workforce, and for, of course, investing in public services as well. So I'm sure we'll get into those discussions in great detail. So let me end where I started, which is to thank you very much for making the journey to come here, for taking the time to come here, for what will be a really open discussion. Genuinely, we're happy for you to ask us about anything. My predecessor would often say, so I'll steal her line, that I will take all the easy questions, they'll take all the hard ones, as you would expect. But we'll do our best to answer all the questions. If we don't have the information, I promise you my officials who are here will take your details and we'll get you a fuller update in writing where we can. George will chair the session. He'll take questions, I think, in batches of 3, pass them to me, and I'll pass them on. I'll say a few words and then I'll pass them on. I should say I will attempt to answer some of them, and then I'll pass them on, obviously, for more detailed response to the relevant Cabinet Secretary. So you are also welcome to join us for refreshments afterwards. It's an opportunity, maybe in a more private space, if you want to ask us particular questions, I'd be happy to answer them. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to be here. It is now my pleasure to hand over to George, and really look forward to an excellent public discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, First Minister. And I, of course, will not be taking any questions today unless you're wanting to talk about obscure parliamentary procedures. Basically, can I take this time now to introduce everyone who's here from the Cabinet, from left to right, and I'm assuming, yes, that's your left. We have Mary McAllen, who's the Cabinet Secretary for Transport, Net Zero and Just Transition. We have Deputy First Minister and Cabinet Secretary for Finance, Shona Robertson. We have the First Minister himself. We have Neil Gray, Cabinet Secretary for Wellbeing, Economy, Fair Work and Energy. And in the front row, finishing it, but no means by last, forgotten about, Mary Goujon, Cabinet Secretary for Rural Affairs and Islands. In the back row, from left to right, we have Shirley-Ann Somerville, who's the Cabinet Secretary for Social Justice, Angus Robertson, Cabinet Secretary for Constitution, External Affairs and Culture, Jenna Gilruth, Cabinet Secretary for Education and Skills, Patrick Harvey, Minister for Zero Carbon Buildings, Active Travel and Tenants' Rights, and Angela Constance, Cabinet Secretary for Justice and Home Affairs, along with Michael Matheson, Cabinet Secretary for NHS Recovery, Health and Social Care. As the First Minister said, I will take the questions in batches of 3 and I will invite the First Minister to answer all the questions. I'll also take some of the questions that have been asked by those in social media when I eventually get that bit of paper. It says Annex A here, but I've not got it. But we normally have more questions than time that's available. So if you don't get a chance to ask your question, you can email your question to the email address that's on the screen and on the evaluation form on your seat. Or there will be 2 members of staff who will be available in the hall at the end of the event who can record any question and email it for you. All questions will receive a written response. So let's make a start. Can I ask you to raise your hand, and if you have a question, wait until the microphone comes and then tell us your name before asking the question. Okay then, can we ask this woman down here?
My name's Janet Graham. I live in Inveraray locally. I've campaigned for independence for all of my life. And right at this moment, we're dipping in and out of 50% and above. There's £80 billion worth of oil that we suddenly don't want. What on earth's happening? We're focusing on an identity politics so that poor people don't get together and fight back against the government that can jail a man on accusation with a juryless trial, or put a woman in jail for stating a biological fact alongside rapists. What the hell are you doing, guys? Where's independence? You've sold us out.
Okay, other hands, please. If I'll get the gentleman at the back.
Oh, thank you. My name's John Campbell. I retired here, or semi-retired here, 5 years ago, and opened a little bed and breakfast. So my question is about short-term licensing. In that 5 years, I endured COVID, a cost of living crisis, and now this short-term license. So far, I think it's cost us about £1,000 at the end of the season just to comply. We run a small bed and breakfast, 3 bedrooms. It's not an Airbnb in Edinburgh. And my question is has the legislation achieved what it should have done, which was properly regulate short-term leasing, or has it just created unnecessary bureaucracy? Because that is all it seems like. And I should just say, I come from 30 years in the food industry, and I was audited regularly. So when people put standards up against me, they came and did what they were told. And you had to, or you'd lose business. I don't see any auditing of these forms that we're filling in. I've been told that Argyll and Bute will take 6 months to even give us an answer to see if we've got a licence. Now, I should just premise this with, I believe in Scottish independence, and I'm a member of the SNP and proud of it, and I'm fully supportive of you. But guys, I really think there is a case to just have a rethink on this.
Okay, one last question in this group. Gentleman at the back there.
Hello, my name is Ewan Colville. I'm a board member of Argyll and the Isles Tourism Cooperative, and I run a number of businesses in Argyll, and I live in Argyll. So my question, I wanted to just pick up on another tourism-related question, but it's the transient visitor levy, which is known as the tourism tax. And I've got, my question is in 2 parts, fairly straightforward. The first part is, would the First Minister and the Cabinet give a commitment that if the transient visitor levy is brought forward, that it will be one does all for Scotland? Because offloading it to 32 different local authorities to do it differently and potentially not do it very well at all, as has been the case with the short-term let, is just not the way to do it remotely. And my second question, this is a critical question about the tourism tax. Will the First Minister and the Cabinet commit to undertaking an impact survey before this is rolled out and before this is made legislation? And when I say an impact survey, I don't mean, because all we hear at the moment is, oh, other countries do it and other cities do it, so we should do it. At the moment, international tourism is incredibly competitive, and we're trying to recover as an industry from the pandemic and from the cost of living crisis. And the added burden which will fall on the industry of taking the tax and what that will then do to the cost that we pass on to our visitors is deeply, deeply concerning. So I think a proper impact survey should be done that would look at the cost benefit of not actually doing it. What are the advantages to our destination, Argyll, and to Scotland as a destination of being a tourism tax-free destination? I'm not saying we always do that, but right now, look at the optics of it. if we were to be not imposing a tax on visitors, it's not a very welcome message, and so I would urge you to commit to a proper impact survey. Thank you.
Okay, there's a good start. First Minister. First was Jeanette Graham on independence, John Campbell on the short-term lets, and Ewan just there on visitor levy.
All right, thanks. If anybody had any doubt that in anything that I said about questions not being planted, I hope the first 3 questions have dispelled that myth that you may have had, because they are very challenging questions and right to be challenging. That's the entire purpose of travelling cabinet. Look, Janet, I suppose there'll be a disagreement between us on a couple of points. What we don't disagree on, and this is no surprise to anybody, is I believe that Scotland should be independent. I've believed that virtually my whole life. My father was a member of the SNP, the first Asian member of Glasgow SNP in the 1970s. When he joined, I've believed it, as I say, for many years, that Scotland's best future as an independent nation. Some people in this room will agree with that. Some will vehemently disagree with that. And we have to make sure that we are persuading those of us who believe in independence, persuading those who don't. And one of the key areas, I think, of persuading the public, persuading those who vote no, is through delivering good government, which I think goes to the very heart of your question. When it comes to issues around identity politics, I suppose, again, I take a different view to you. My belief as a minority in this country, somebody who from the day he was born, was very visibly a minority in this country, I've always believed that my rights don't exist in a vacuum. I believe that my rights as a minority...
My rights don't exist as a woman.
No, in a vacuum either.
Define a woman.
Yeah, so we can get into this whole question, if you wish, and we can take this debate off table. Look, people have chosen to come here. You get to ask a question. Other people get to ask questions. If you want to join us for refreshments and have a much more detailed discussion, I'm more than happy to do that. When it comes to the issue of minorities and rights, not just of minorities, of anybody who has their rights, feels that their rights are under attack, my belief is that those rights, I don't believe those rights exist in a vacuum. I've always believed that in order to advance my rights, I have to advance your rights, whether it's as a woman, whether it's as somebody who's from the trans community, whether it's somebody who's from the LGBT community, whether it's somebody that has a disability. I believe that we've got to try to do what we can to advance their rights without impinging on the rights of others. So that's where you and I might have a difficulty.
You can't be after independence. You've just put all our natural resources into free ports for 25 years.
No, and look, again, you're going to have to forgive me. We're going to have some structure to this conversation. Otherwise, people who are putting their hands up are not going to get an opportunity. Okay, we'll have an opportunity. Though you're always more than welcome to stay, and this goes to everybody. You're more than welcome to continue to make your points after the meeting as well. But in terms of, I just wanted to address a point. I know Janet's not here anymore, but this is an important issue about juryless trials, which again will spark a great degree of interest over the coming weeks, over the coming months, and over the coming years. This government very clearly believes in the right of people, the accused, as well as, of course, anybody who is the complainer, in the right to a free trial. But we've also got to make sure that we are doing what we can to improve the experiences for those that are survivors and victims of sexual offences and rape in particular, because all of the evidence speaks for itself, that not just are the rates of conviction much lower than other offences, but I would suggest that more importantly, that the experience for a victim or survivor of rape is at times, as Rape Crisis Scotland say, worse than the actual rape itself. That's a horrendous message for us to hear. So that's why there's a time-limited pilot being suggested for juryless trials. And that's not being suggested by the government, it's been suggested actually by a judge, Scotland's second most senior judge. But that's an issue, again, which I'm certain there'll be plenty of conversation over the next few weeks and months. I will go to John's question before I bring in other Cabinet Secretaries. And can I say, first of all, John, that when it comes to the question that you asked, we do recognise the challenges that our tourism sector has faced over a number of years. You mentioned COVID, Brexit has been undoubtedly difficult in terms of staff retention and recruitment, as well as, of course, the pandemic. And I can go to Neil later on, who can talk a little bit about tourism more in the round in terms of what we're doing to support the tourism industry, but also the new deal for business. I'll be honest, I heard this when I first came in to position as First Minister, that a number of businesses felt we weren't listening to them, we weren't responding to them, and that's why Neil, who led this effort, we signed within the first 100 days the new deal for business with business. Now, the new deal for business is not any good as a bit of paper that lies on a shelf. The implementation of that is going to be really, really important. For me, on the short-term licensing side of things, obviously now the 1st of October has passed. We're very much past the deadline. For me, it's just so important that whether you're an Airbnb or a bed and breakfast, that there is a level of certainty around, for example, important regulations such as fire safety and fire regulations, such as Legionella assessments, risk assessments that are done. These are all important pieces of legislation and regulation that I think are vital to give safety, security, assurance to tourists, whether they're from Scotland or abroad, in terms of the short-term licence that they're staying in. And that's all we're asking people to do. And we've been a listening government. We extended the original deadline, so people have had, like your own business, 20 months to be able to make the application, but we don't want to create even more burden for you. And I'll ask Neil to come in shortly on your question, John, and also on, you can talk to tourism in terms of Ewan's question. In terms of the transit visitor levy, I'll come to Shona in a moment. I should say, certainly, maybe we need to communicate this more publicly. It certainly should be made clear that it is not a compulsory levy. So your suggestion of the levy being almost a kind of blanket levy across 32 local authorities, there'll be a lot of local authorities who will not bring in a transient visitor levy. There'll be some local authorities who think it is the right thing to do, and we would fully expect them to bring in an impact assessment in terms of the business impact it would make. What I'm happy to do, and we'll take your details, Ewan, if we can, is give you a level of certainty around what the assessments we'd expect a local authority to do, and what consideration we'd expect them to give before bringing in a transient visitor levy. And also an assurance that certainly the expectation is that that money that is gained from a transient visitor levy is then spent on tourist infrastructure. I think that is an important part as well. But it's not a compulsory levy, so I don't think we would bring in, look, all 32 local authorities have to do it, because it should be up to the local authority to make a decision about whether they want to bring in such a levy or not. But do you want to come in that point? I'll bring Neil maybe on general tourism points on top of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think getting your details so that it's Tom Arthur's the Minister who leads on this, and I think he would be able to furnish you with a lot more information around the impact survey that you ask about. But First Minister's point about, local authorities will assess whether it's something they want to introduce, and I think it'll be 2026 before it's the earliest point at which it can be introduced. Just one thing on short-term lets. I, for my sins, took the legislation through, so and we did a lot of detailed work. There was a lot of changes because some of it I think we agreed that was overly onerous. So there was a lot of changes around EPC and some of the requirements that had to be made. But there will be a review period of the short-term licensing to, I guess, answer that question that John posed about has the legislation achieved what it set out to do. Now, clearly, it's only just come in for the 1st of October, but I think it is right that we review legislation and we then do an impact of has it, and if it needs changed, then I think absolutely we should look at what the evidence tells us. So I think that's a commitment that we've made to do.
Yeah. So before I bring in Neil, I'll bring in Shirley Ann on short-term lets, and then I'll bring in Neil on a general tourism point, and then we'll hand back to you guys.
Thanks, Sir Minister. I'll be very brief on that because both FM and DFM have said something on this already, but really just to once again reiterate why this was brought in, and it was about ensuring safety. So, for example, during my summer, I was actually here in Inveraray staying over with my family. I spent another weekend up in Oban. So when we are all going about, whether it's domestic tourism or international tourism, how do we ensure that the safety that we expect in our situations as we go around is everywhere? So how can I be safe? Now that will necessitate that people will go through a process around, fire, water safety, electrical safety and so on. But that is in essence why this scheme was brought in. But Deputy First Minister's quite right. We're already looking at the scope of the review for next year, very keen to learn lessons from that. We're continuing to, right up to the last minute, thinking about changes and working with local authorities, because some of the concerns that people have had are about the non-mandatory parts, the more discretionary parts that local authorities are putting into the scheme. So how can government, national and local, work together to make sure that we're getting this right and getting what we want out of it, which is high quality tourism at the end of the day, so we can have that reassurance to people, just like I had when I was in Inveraray and Oban over the summer.
Anything briefly on tourism, and then we'll hand back.
Well, first of all, just to say that I'm incredibly proud to be someone that comes from an island community. I'm originally from Orkney, to have responsibility for tourism within my portfolio alongside Richard Lochhead. It's an area that has huge importance to the Scottish economy. It's something that we can and should and it must pedal harder to ensure that we can be proud of in that competitive international environment that there is. But part of that is maintaining high and consistent standards, and so short-term licensing obviously helps with that. To give some reassurance to John, I've had pretty regular engagement with Mark Rothwell from the Scottish Tourism Association over the summer, look to provide reassurances and further information in that sense as well, to further underline the fact that we continue to listen. The points that Shirley-Ann, First Minister, Deputy First Minister, have said about the constant review. There is an opportunity there to look to make sure that this is serving its purpose, that it is doing what it set out to do. And one final point for the business responsibility that I have to pass on is that when your application is in, you can obviously continue to trade. And that's while the application is being considered. And I think that's really important, because I think there's been some miscommunication, misunderstanding, misinformation, perhaps from some quarters, that this was a deadline beyond which you could not trade. If your application is in, you can continue to trade while it is being considered by the local authority. Yeah. But I'm happy to have a discussion afterwards, both Ewan and John, regarding the tourism points that have been made.
Okay, thank you for that. That's us warmed up well and truly. A good start. Can I ask everyone to ask shorter questions, and I'll try and encourage my colleagues to give shorter answers so that we can get through more. Yes, sir. Your name, and wait for the microphone. Gentleman down the front.
Thanks very much. My name's Norman Bissell. I'm an author and part owner of the only shop on the Isle of Ling in Argyll, and shop and post office, and my partner is here with me today. We've come from the Isle of Ling today, and I hope the First Minister remembers and recalls visiting the Ling Community Trust Atlantic Island Centre in 2016 when he was a young Islands Minister, as I recall. And
emphasis on the young.
Yes, emphasis on the young, exactly. And I do recall showing him around, and we've got photos to prove it. He was there, and he took a great interest in our island. I'm pleased to say that the centre is thriving. Over 30 people have come to live on the island since 2019, including 4 families with 7 children of primary school age and less. Seven children. And the Trust is working on very hard to restart small-scale slate extraction in Cullipo, which is where the Atlantic Island Centre is. And that has been supported by Highlands and Islands Enterprise, and it's being supported by Historic Environment Scotland, who are looking for recycled slates. And we're going to provide them. And so that project could employ five new people. 5 jobs could be developed from that. It's also got plans to build affordable housing and a net zero community garden project. So the island is going forward in a united way behind the Ling Community Trust and the Community Council. However, the fly in the ointment is that the council is going to close Ling Primary School next May, which will discourage more families from coming to the island. And the Ling community is unanimous in opposing its closure and wants it to continue to be mothballed. The majority Tory Liberal Democrat group in the council has ignored our views and consistently voted against amendments to which have come from the opposition to continue the mothballing. They want to close it next year. And they have ignored their views, so we're appealing to you today, First Minister, who knows where Ling is and who knows what it's like and how we're going forward, and to the Schools Minister to call in this proposal when it comes to you next March and to reject it so that we can get more time to attract more families with children to live on Ling. And my two short questions are, I've done this before, as you can tell. I'm just giving you the background.
Is your name Christine Graham? You know,
So, my first question just follows on from that. Would you seriously consider supporting the Ling community in this, as our MSP Jenny Minto has, and calling in this proposal and retaining the only school that we have on the Isle of Ling? That's the first question. And the second one is a more general one. Why is an island primary school threatened with closure in spite of the Islands Act and the urgent need to tackle depopulation, which you referred to in your opening statement? Tackling depopulation requires a school to be there, which is at least a chance of reopening, so that families will be encouraged to come there and not discouraged. So that's my questions.
well, thank you for that quick question, Norman. Much appreciated. Can we get another couple of questions?
Came from
over here.
Hello, Linda Mitchell from Ali Energy, a charity which is helping people with fuel poverty. So I want to ask about fuel poverty today. Obviously a really serious problem right across Scotland, but particularly in rural parts of Scotland. And that's the parts of Scotland which are off the gas grid, so having to use different forms of heating which are more expensive, much more expensive. We're seeing fuel poverty levels probably over 50% of all households right across the northwest of Scotland, and that's the majority of households, and that's really unacceptable. And I know that the Scottish Government is already doing some things to help with fuel poverty, and also that the Scottish Government doesn't have the power to deal with some of the causes of fuel poverty, but nonetheless, what is happening so far isn't enough. The help isn't getting to everyone who needs it. We have people that we see every day who are unable to turn their heating on and shall be suffering through this winter with no heating, with cold and damp homes which are affecting their physical and mental health. So my question is, what more can the Scottish Government do about this?
Okay, and another question in this batch. Can I get the gentleman at the back?
Hi, my name's Jamie McMillan. I'm a shellfish exporter in Tarbert, Lochfine. What is SNP's future policy to safeguard fishing jobs both at sea, on shore and on shore on the west coast of Scotland, but especially in Argyll and Bute, where there's a heavy reliance on fishing at sea and supporting the rural communities in and around Argyll and Bute and the islands? Marine Scotland decision went against our business in the early part of this year, which made me 5 people redundant within my business, and it nearly cost my business. The future of fishing in Argyll and Bute is at risk, especially after the fiasco with highly protected marine areas. Fishing's been in my family's blood for generations, and it's something we're passionate about. I'm currently exporting our shellfish from Lochfine and the west coast around Argyll and Bute all over the world. So what is the SNP's future policy on fishing to safeguard jobs in our rural communities?
Okay, thank you. So just to go through these very quick questions here. Norman was really short and snappy by telling us the whole history of Lyng Community Trust. Then we moved on to Linda Mitchell with fuel poverty in rural Scotland and what the government is looking at doing. And Jamie McMillan was talking about future of fishing both at sea and inshore.
Yeah. Thanks for that. I'll give a very brief comment and then pass on to the Cabinet Secretaries. Norman, I do remember very well the visit to Lyng, partly because it was probably some of the best langoustine I ever tasted in my life. I remember it well, but I remember it more so because at the heart of it, if we entrust our communities with their land, then we know, of course, that the land will thrive. And that is an example of that I saw even this morning. I see Chris here in the room today, Inveraray, inspired Inveraray when I went to the Inveraray Pier, and the excellent proposals that the team and the community have here for restoration of that pier. We're delighted the Scottish Government to provide some funding towards that particular project. Look, I'll cut to the question, or the questions, if I may. It will be for local councils, of course, to ultimately consider these decisions. I'll pass to Jenny in a moment, but my understanding is that closure of or proposed closure of a rural school would be called in anyway, so it will be called in by government, but Jenny can provide confirmation of that. And of course, the views of the community will be really important. The views of the local council will be really important as well. So we'll look to engage where we can. Your point around, primary schools remaining either open or mothballed and not permanently closed, and if they are closed, what does that do to population and depopulation, is a very good question. One of the things we have tried to do in the last 6 months, and I've tried to do, is genuinely empower our local authorities even more than they already are to make decisions that are in their community's best interest, because it's better they make those decisions than us sitting in Edinburgh in St Andrew's House making those decisions for communities in Lyng or across Gyle and Bute. It's much better for the council, we believe, to make those decisions in the best interest of their local community. So that's why they are empowered to explore these discussions. And perhaps a good time to bring Jenny in, who's the Education Secretary, and then I'll answer perhaps the other two questions, but you can give confirmation of that particular point.
Thank you, Minister. I think, Norman, a really important point. I've not been to Lyng to experience these langoustines, so I'll need to come and see your school and experience the langoustines too. But the First Minister is absolutely correct. When a local authority, of course, they run our schools, when a local authority chooses to mothball or to then go forward with full closure, they have to first of all engage with the local community, and then it would come to me as Cabinet Secretary for a decision. It also sits alongside independent advice from HMI, the Inspectorate, who will give me an opportunity to look at the full picture and the local community. But I'd be more than happy, Norman, to have a chat with you about this later on and to learn a little bit more about your school, recognising, though, to the First Minister's point, that ultimately the responsibility here will rest with the local authority.
And Linda's very powerful point that she articulated around fuel poverty. I go back to what I said in my opening remarks, that I still am aghast as First Minister that we can be a country that is as energy rich as ours, but still in as much fuel poverty as we currently are. Now, that doesn't absolve us of the need to act, because you're right, a number of the powers do rest with the UK government, particularly around energy pricing, and there's a need to reform that market quite considerably. But look, let's put that to the side and let's be upfront about the fact that where we have powers, we should use them to the absolute maximum effect to help people that are suffering. One of the first acts of mine as First Minister was to not double but triple the Fuel Insecurity Fund, to make sure that that money is getting to the people that absolutely need it. I also just want to make the point that we have quite ambitious targets and plans around moving from direct emission heating systems to much more cleaner zero emission heating systems. But we don't expect that the full cost or the full upfront cost should land on the public, particularly in the midst of a cost of living crisis. And that is more pronounced in rural communities where you have, for example, the use of oil boilers and as opposed to necessarily gas boilers, for example. So we know there is a need, particularly when it comes to our rural, remote and island communities, when it comes to our net zero plans, that we are not burdening the public with the costs of that. So Did you want to come in particularly on energy, and then I'll...
Yeah, I first of all want to reflect on what Norman raised, because I've already referenced the fact that I'm originally from Orkney, come from an island community where throughout the entirety of my time at primary school, my primary school was at risk of closure, and I recognise in the tactics that you've deployed today, much of that my dad deployed in fighting that entire time to save that primary school. So well done, indeed.
It's not a good look when the Cabinet Secretary saying well done.
So I perfectly understand the position that Ling will be in. Named after an area of my Airdrie constituency, residential area, is actually named after Ling as well, so I've got an additional affinity there. But in terms of Linda's very powerful point, and thank you very much for the work that you are doing, absolutely fundamental to helping to alleviate the pain and pressure that people are feeling, presumably last winter, but will be coming up this winter. Gillian Martin is leading some considerable work on this front from a fuel insecurity perspective, and if you haven't already got the details, I'll make sure that that work is being shared with you. And this actually, if I inject a little bit of politics into this, it actually goes to the heart of why I believe in independence, that we are energy rich, but we don't have the power in order to fully utilise the energy resources that we do have. Substantial amount that is generated here in Argyll and Bute. I want to see communities, I want to see the people of Scotland benefit far better than what they do at the moment, partly because of what the First Minister has set out, our reliance currently on energy prices being pegged to the gas wholesale price, but also the electricity that has been generated in remote rural island communities furthest from the network, the grid, is you're having to pay in order to put that electricity to market. When it's got the greatest potential to be able to derive clean, cheap energy, it is totally counterintuitive. And we only get through that hurdle with the powers that are currently not residing with us. But the fundamental point that you make about what we can do now, the First Minister has obviously referenced the Fuel Insecurity Fund, and I'll make sure that you're furnished with further details on other work that is coming forward to make sure that you're fully aware and can pass that on in the fantastic work that you're doing.
Yeah, and just on that, Patrick can probably speak to the Warm Homes Fund as well.
Yeah, I mean, the points that have been made about price are really important. Renewable electricity is the cheapest energy to generate, but we're not able to pass that on to bill payers, and that's fundamentally unjust, as well as making a barrier to people shifting to zero emissions heating. But in the example that I visited this morning with Argyll Community Housing Association, they're installing heat pumps and liberating people from reliance on much more expensive fuels than people elsewhere might be using who are on the gas grid. So the shift away from fossil fuels is actually much more in the interests of the financial well-being of households that are currently relying on those more expensive fuels. It's worth just noting that today is actually the first day of the relaunch of the Warmer Homes Scotland Fund. So the new version of that will not just be more overall investment, it'll mean more measures supporting more households in more ways. And I would encourage anyone who isn't familiar with that, have a look at it online, Warmer Homes Scotland, or go through the Home Energy Scotland website, and that will give you information about the flexible and generous grants and loans that are available to help households. Some of that's directed specifically at households in fuel poverty, but all households can get access to some level of support as well.
And can we make sure that a detailed written response comes to you, Linda, and we'll make sure that comes to you with contact details for anybody that you want to follow up on, because there's a lot of action we're taking, but due to brevity, we will not be able to go through all of that. Jamie's well-made point, and rightly, receiving a round of applause, is clear emotion behind that, but also clear support from others in Argyll and Bute, and I suspect across Scotland, in relation to the fishing industry. And I'm going to pass to Marie Goujon shortly, the Cabinet Secretary for Rural Affairs, to talk to that point. Look, one of the primary reasons we were so concerned about the UK's exit from the EU was around the export market and the loss of that export market. And that to me is still a source of great frustration and concern. On HPMAs, and look, I heard what you had to say about that. That is an example, I would hope, of the government listening. It was a consultation, nobody had decided what was, nothing was being implemented. The voice of your voice, the voice of the fishing communities, the communities that use our coast, those coastal communities was listened to, went back to the drawing board. And we want to try to preserve our marine environment because we believe it will help with the fishing industry. So if we take an example of the no-take zone in Lamlash Bay, that was a no-take zone that the community wanted in place. Now, the evidence of that, we've seen species thrive. So where can we work with communities and say, okay, we've got a vested interest, both of us, we've all got a vested interest in protecting our marine environment. If we don't protect our marine environment, there's no fishing industry for the future. So you tell us, how do we protect it? Let's work with you to protect that marine environment so that species can thrive, so there's a fishing industry not for years to come, but for generations to come thereafter. Obviously, I don't know the detail about the Marine Scotland decision that went against you. More than happy to discuss that if you're going to stick around for the refreshments later on. We can take details of that and see what we can do to assist and help. But I'll pass over to Mary.
Hi, Jimmy. Thanks for your question, because I do think in relation to seafood and where we are with fisheries and policy going forward, I mean, it's easy to see we produce some of the best seafood anywhere in the world. That's why it's in such high demand. And that's why it's an industry we support, we want to continue to support going forward. And if anything, I want to see more people consume it domestically and right across Scotland. I don't think we eat enough of what we produce. So in that regard, there are a couple of things that we're looking at in relation to, we had the Good Food Nation Act, which was passed last year, and it's about really connecting all these areas of food policy. We're going to be bringing forward a local food strategy as well about how we strengthen local supply chains, get more people educated about what we produce in Scotland, and ultimately how we can get more people consuming more of what we produce here too. But as the First Minister was saying, it's about having managing that resource and how we manage our fisheries sustainably going forward into the future. We recognise how important fisheries is through, we'll have a couple of different strategies. Our Blue Economy vision, as an example, sets out where we see the fishing industry within that, and we see it as a really important outcome, as well as a seafood strategy too. But again, you know, just talking earlier, it's all very well having a strategy, but what are the actions that you're taking to put that into motion, which are really critical. But we've had a number of measures recently. So we had our consultation results on the future catching policy and on remote electronic monitoring as well. And I think all of what's that's going to mean for each part of the fisheries sector that we have. But I think that those take us huge steps forward in terms of the sustainable management of our fisheries as well. So I do think that we are taking steps in the right direction, but I think I would just want to give you that assurance today. We very much support our fishing industry. There's a strong role for that going forward, not least in terms of the important source of protein that it produces as well. So we want to ensure that there is that future for the industry going forward.
Can we just follow up by, not just yourself, Jamie, but I think there's maybe a few from the industry that are here. If you are here, please grab me at the end, but also Mary, leave us with your details, because genuinely we want to be able to hear from you, because you've got a vested interest in making sure that this is an industry that is thriving well into the future. Back to you, George.
Okay, thank you, First Minister. Right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going into the rapid fire round now. We've not succeeded in any get short questions or short answers. Vote of no confidence in the chair. But if we could possibly just get some questions just now, and we'll take it from there. The woman there with the white jumper.
Thank you. I do have a short question. You'll be glad to know with an even shorter answer. First Minister, you'll be delighted.
What's your name,
My
sorry?
name's Jane MacLeod.
Jane MacLeod.
You'll be delighted, First Minister. It's not about the rest to be thankful, and it's not about juryless trials. Your audience is our Argyll and Bute residents. And can I ask you, First Minister, and your Cabinet colleagues to join with us, residents of Argyll and Bute, in congratulating our very own Bob McIntyre on his... I would invite you to join with us in congratulating our very own Bob McIntyre on his success in the Ryder Cup. As you know, Bob is a native of Oban. He's a former pupil of our very excellent Oban High School. He's a wonderful ambassador for Oban, for Argyll and Bute, and for Scotland. And I think it would be very appropriate, short yes, no answer, would you please congratulate Bob on his success? Thank you.
Can I abuse the chair and say yes, we're all extremely proud of what you achieved yesterday. And when I wasn't in Rutherglen at the by-election, I was enjoying watching the Ryder Cup all weekend. So it was very good. Gentlemen.
Hi, my name is John Gurr. I'm representing the Rest of Me Thankful campaign group.
What was your name again, sir?
John Gurr.
John Gurr.
And it's really given the recent audit report by Audit Scotland, which suggests that investment in infrastructure is going to be tricky going forward. We've just, after 3 years of campaigning and working with some of your colleagues, got a permanent solution identified by Transport Scotland, which is excellent. But given this news, how likely are we to see funding for a permanent solution in either this Parliament or indeed the next one?
Okay, thank you. And one more. Someone give us a hand. Oh, yes, gentleman in the back.
Chris Clark, George Hotel in Inveraray. Thank you, First Minister, for your... Good. With some good langoustines as well. Thank you for your...
Before you ask your question, George, we spent a fortune last night.
Get back tonight then, you're more than welcome. Thank you for your time, First Minister. It was a very engaging meeting we had, and I look forward to you confirming that you're going to revisit Inveraray next April for the opening, hopefully, of the pier. And I think you decided you were going to jump off the shed. That was the local rite of passage. But it's a hospitality-based question. I mean, you talk about investment in the tourism infrastructure, and from what I see from within my industry, there might not be an infrastructure there, because I look at my NDR, my non-domestic rates this year, were due to go up by 63%, from 167,000 to 277,000 pounds. Now that's a net figure, so I need to triple that as a gross to get the net. I then also had to endure 9.68% increase in wages on top of 6.6 last year and 3.3 the year before. So all of these are contributing to crippling the industry. So to me, there's no point investing in the industry because there won't be many venues left. I drive over to Perth regularly, and 8 out of 16 venues are closed. So that's an indication of who's struggling. They're unable to open, and if they do open, it's just not profitable. So I want to ask whether there's any assurance in the future that there will be NDR rate relief or some kind of assistance for the hospitality industry. Thank you.
Okie dokie. Quickly, First Minister, with June McLeod, with Argyll and Bute and Oban in particular, is Bob McIntyre.
Yeah, I think we could all, thank you for asking that question. I think we could all and should all put on record our pride in Bob's incredible performance and the whole of Team Europe's incredible achievement. I tweeted about Bob yesterday to say that he was the pride of Scotland, not just the pride of Oban, though I understand why he'd be the pride of Oban, but he's the absolute pride of Scotland. There's a fantastic video clip of Bob, if you haven't seen it, I'm sure you probably have, of getting the entire Team Europe on the bus singing 500 Miles by the Proclaimers, which I thought was the most Scottish thing to do on any road trip, let alone with the rider, with Team Europe in the Ryder Cup. So really proud of Bob, and you know, Bob is an excellent example of that real, you know, and we can think of so many other examples on record, our appreciation for Bob McIntyre and from Team Europe. On John Gurr's question on the A83, where's John? I lost him. There he is. John, I remember from my old Transport Minister days, of course, attending the A83 task force in Arica, I think was the last time I attended that meeting. A couple of points that I'll make is there is absolutely a firm commitment to the preferred option around the A83. To the credit of Argyll and Bute Council, it was the very first issue they raised with us when we had a meeting earlier on today, and they asked that very question, does the commitment mean a funding commitment? The answer to that is yes. There's no point making a commitment in spirit without the money. The money's got to be there. Your point is absolutely right, though. The funding position is very difficult. Around infrastructure, and the Finance Secretary is looking at innovative finance models at the moment to see how we progress those funding options. The other point I'd make, John, is as well as that preferred option, and there is a process to go through, as you know, within the legislation. That's why it takes, unfortunately, as much time as it often does. We've got to make improvements to the old military road as well, because we've got to have resilience on that route in the kind of shorter term while the preferred solution is being built. So perhaps I'll go to Mary McCall and see if there's anything that she wishes to add on the transport front on the 83, and then we'll go to Chris's question after that.
Thanks, First Minister, and thank you for the question. I suppose I would just, from the outset, acknowledge the quite understandable groan at the beginning when the Rest and Be Thankful was mentioned. I'm not from Argyll and Bute, but I live very rurally in the south of Scotland, so I understand very acutely, I think as Councillor Curry put it at the beginning, both the joys and challenges of rural life, so I completely get that. And as George said, I was at the Rest and Be Thankful this morning with my Transport Scotland officials, and they were talking me through, with the visual right in front of us, all of the work that's to be taken. The First Minister has perfectly clearly outlined our financial commitment to that, and that's something that I'll keep taking forward within government. I suppose I would just say my reflection so far, having been in the post, is that the absolute priority is a permanent solution as soon as possible and reassurance on safety in the meantime. So that's certainly what I take my responsibility to, and the First Minister's outlined some of that work that will begin on the old military road. I'm very much hoping by this year. That's certainly the instruction that I have given to Transport Scotland officials, and we will keep doing that work as we move through the statutory processes to plan for the permanent solution, and then we will move into construction. And of course, the First Minister's right, very complicated process. Equally, the time it takes can be impacted by the nature and extent of comments and views from the public, and we will take that into account. So the funding commitment you've been given, you've got a commitment from me to keep working determinedly through both the medium and the long-term solutions. And the final commitment I would give you is to ongoing, meaningful community engagement. And I know that you're meeting with the Transport Minister as part of the task force this week. So we will keep doing that, and we'll keep listening and talking to one another as we progress.
Thanks. Mary, I'll move on to Chris's question, and I'll shortly go to Shona, seeing as she maxed out her credit card in your hotel last night. I'll go to her to answer the point on NTR. The only thing I would say, look, first of all, let me congratulate you, and I can see a few of the members of the Inspire Inveraray here for incredible work that you are doing, and I've got every faith in your ability to restore that pier, and I'll be delighted to come back in April, not to jump off the pier, but to officially open it. Your point's well made about hospitality. It was a point that was made by Ewan and John earlier on, which is that there's no doubt hospitality has suffered through a range of various different challenges over the years. Brexit, no doubt, pandemic, undoubtedly, and generally cost of living crisis. As staff people don't have as much expendable capital to spend when they're in restaurants and local businesses. There's a lot we're doing, particularly in around the apprentices, employability side of things, which are very, very keen, because I know workforce challenges are significant, and you and I were talking about this earlier this morning, Chris. And again, I'll not spend terribly long talking about those issues which are out with my control. They frustrate me as well. I mean, the fact that inflation is sky high and has been, particularly since the disaster of the mini-budget last year, doesn't help you. We also face that challenge within government. Our budget worth 10% less than it was when it was set last December. That is significantly difficult for us and challenging. But on the very specific question on NDI, I'm going to hand to non-domestic rates. I'm going to hand to Shona, and Neil will come in because he's been leading the work on the new deal for business, which is very much discussed non-domestic rates. But Shona, do you want to come in, then I'll pass over to Neil.
Yeah, I mean, on the point, the subgroup on NDR is looking at various options. It's got business representation around the table. And in terms of the NDR rates release specifically, we'll look at that in the context of the 2024-25 budget going forward. I mean, I guess, you know, just wider context, we do have a lot of support for us. The small business bonus scheme is most generous in the UK. So for small businesses across different sectors, they do get that additional support, and we do have the lowest poundage in the UK for the 5th year in a row. But you know, we certainly have had representation from the hospitality sector in particular around the point you make about NDR rates reliefs. But we'll need to consider that as part of all of the issues we consider around the tax and spending priorities in the budget. But I'm sure it's something you'll...
Can we, you know, within that review group, can there be some outside of the box thinking? So this isn't just about increasing or decreasing non-domestic rates. Decreasing, obviously, is what businesses want us to do. But can we look at what more we can do, for example, linking non-domestic rates to profitability, for talking sake, so that when you're making money, then actually you're paying more rates, and when you're not making money, then there's flexibility within the system. So there's a bit of kind of outside of the box thinking that we're asking the group to do, as well as just looking at, well, do we have the right level or threshold of rates relief? But I'll pass over to Neil.
Thanks, First Minister. Thanks, Chris. The point I wanted to make was that the New Deal for Business Group isn't a one-off. You know, we've published the recommendations that the First Minister's accepted, and we're now going through the process of generating an implementation plan around that, but it is an iterative process as well, and particularly around where there might be areas beyond non-domestic rates that the Deputy First Minister's already spoken of, but some of the other challenges that might be facing businesses in general, such as the cumulative regulatory burden that we're aware of, where there might be other ideas that can come forward, suggestions that can come from business. That is the forum through which to put those to us, and we'll absolutely consider what we can do to make sure that the landscape through which to do business here in Scotland is as attractive and as strong as possible, because we recognise the importance that you play in generating economic growth for a purpose, which is to see a fairer, sustainable Scotland. But we absolutely recognise the importance that business plays in making sure that we can see that economic growth come here in Scotland.
But Chris, can I just say, my wife phoned me first thing this morning and asked me what on earth did you buy in Inveraray last night. I said, my dinner. But it was lovely. So,
worth every penny, I think, is
what. Worth every penny. So basically, I've got time for one more question. If we can just, someone can ask one more question. Yes.
Hi everyone, I'm Rachel McNichol from Ali Energy, Linda's colleague. You talked about tackling inequality and fuel poverty, so I just want to let you know and ask what Scottish Government can do to help the communities left behind in Argyll and Bute. A large proportion of the Argyll and Bute Authority is on electric storage heating because they're not in the mains gas grid. A common tariff for electric storage heating is total heat, total control. The technology, the technology that sends the signal to these meters to charge these heaters is due to be switched off next March 2024. The solution for this is smart meters, and a large population in Argyll and Bute are told they can't get a smart meter. So what can Scottish Government do to help our clients?
It's a really good question, and again, I can promise you we share a fair degree of that frustration when a lot of these powers are not in our hands. Now, let's seek to do what we can do in terms of what's in our power and what can we do with the energy companies in particular. And I go back to the point that rural energy poverty is something we're very, very aware of, cognizant of, and prepared to tackle. But I'm just thinking who is best to come in and to tackle some of these issues between Neil and Patrick, perhaps.
Happy to make a short point, and then Patrick might be able to come in more detail. The point that I missed when I was responding to Linda was the fact that my parents, my wife's parents, and a lot of my family still live in Orkney, and so the reliance on heating oil and the electricity type means of heating and being able to fuel their home is very real for my family, and I very much understand those difficulties and those challenges. The First Minister's pointed to the fact that some of those issues that you've pointed to are beyond our regulatory control. Some areas in terms of providing greater support that I think Patrick will be able to come in on, and that will be able to furnish Linda and yourself, Rachel, on in terms of the work that Gillian Martin's bringing forward. We absolutely will, but happy to leave more time for Patrick.
Patrick and Manny, I think, will want to come in as well. But Patrick, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, I mean, as Neil was saying, and as we discussed in the previous question, one of the big frustrations is responsibilities on this and the need for a more coherent approach. The UK Climate Change Committee has been challenging both governments to cooperate more on this, and believe me, it's not for the want of trying. We've been knocking on their door for many years saying the way you make decisions and the way we make decisions needs to work together better. Here are constructive ways to make that happen, and we just don't get an answer from the UK government when we bring forward those proposals, so that's extremely frustrating. Having said that, the shift away from not just fossil fuel consumption, but things like old-fashioned electric storage heaters, toward things like heat pumps and highly energy efficient homes, investing in the fabric of homes so that they need less energy in the first place, is not just about reducing emissions. It's also about reducing fuel poverty. And as I was hearing from the folk I was speaking to this morning, it's households who, you know, they've maybe saved money, or they've maybe found that they're able to keep their whole home warm instead of just one room, or they've been able to use the money they've saved for other things that are basic necessities in life that we should all be able to take for granted. So this shift away from an old-fashioned and unequal as well as polluting energy system toward a zero emissions future, it's not only essential, as the First Minister was describing at the start, about a response to the greatest crisis our planet has ever faced. It's not only essential, but it is also an opportunity. It has to be done fair, but I'm convinced it can be. It has to be done fast, but I'm convinced it can be done fair as well, generating social benefit as well as economic benefit for people in Scotland. But if you want to speak to me again at the end, we can maybe make contact and see if there's further dialogue that we could have with your organisation.
Yeah, particularly in relation to what we can do ahead of March next year. But Mary, you wanted to come in?
No, thank you. My colleagues have covered a lot of it, Rachel, but I mentioned that I live very rurally in the south of Scotland and I'm off-grid. So as Patrick and I and our colleagues are working on the next stage of energy efficiency and new ways to heat our homes, I'm bringing my own personal experience into that. Colleagues have covered a lot of it. The one thing I would say that I'm really passionate about is energy efficiency measures, because the cheapest energy is that which we haven't had to use. And we already have, and we'll furnish you with these details, you'll no doubt be aware of this with the work that you're doing anyway, but grants to support people to upgrade the efficiency of their homes, and there's a premium on that for rural properties because we recognise that they are going to be some of the most difficult to work on. So we'll get those details to you, and I'll also just give you a commitment that as Patrick and I are taking forward the work to respond to the climate emergency and decarbonise our buildings, rural angles to all of that are absolutely at the forefront of my mind, and maybe we can keep in touch about how we develop that bill.
Can I say also that, so we've committed to obviously write to a few people here, which we'll obviously be very keen to do and get you a full response. I'm not sure I was outside of the room if Jenny Minto was introduced or not, but Jenny Minto, your local MSP, will also be more than happy to advocate on your behalf to us. So those that don't know Jenny, she's in the front row here. You can stick your hand up, Jenny, people will know you. Jenny Minto, your local member of the Scottish Parliament. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, First Minister, and many thanks indeed for raising all these interesting, diverse range of issues. I hope you found today's event informative and enjoyable. I'd like to invite you all to join us in the dining room at the front of the hotel where refreshments will be served. Cabinet members and ministers will join you there for a cup of tea or coffee and a chance to continue this conversation. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the First Minister and the Cabinet, I thank you for coming along today and also for your questions. But one final thing, before we all make the mad rush to the tea room, can I ask everyone to remain in their seats while the Cabinet make their way there and then follow us after that, and we can continue the conversation there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.